Hello, this is my opposition rebuttal. My time starts now. Judge, you should vote for the opposition because I have proved and will continue to prove that the UN is both incapable of dealing with the problem of CGS reform and because criminal justice reform is completely out of the jurisdiction of the UN. In the opposition's rebuttal, he says if the UN has provided healthcare, education, and poverty reduction through Millennium Development Goals, is the UN not superseding the domestic government's judgment? End quote. To answer the question, yes, the UN is superseding the government's judgment, but they're also doing it with the government's consent, no doubt. Of course, the country is going to allow these things to be changed by the UN. While criminal justice reform, on the other hand, is a different story. Criminal justice systems vary widely in how they function. While some countries have secular laws, meaning they are separate from religious laws, some countries rely more on religious laws, with one example being some countries in the Middle East, which follow Muslim law to a scripture for a law system. Are countries going to be as willing to change these aspects that they cherish so much? No, they're not. And as stated in the Charter, it is within their rights to stop the UN from changing these things. Proposition also stated that over 6,000 Venezuelans were killed and brutalized, and that essentially I was okay with that because I said a country knows its problems best. This is ridiculous, and here's why. I must ask the proposition, why doesn't the ICC charge the Venezuelan president with crimes against humanity? I'll tell you why, because the quote of sources explain the ICC. When a state becomes a party to the Rome Statute, the treaty setting up the ICC, it agrees to submit itself to the jurisdiction of the ICC with respect to the crimes enumerated in the statute. End quote. And if they don't comply, pretty much nothing happens. This shows that the ICC is powerless to do anything, as the Venezuelan government can just say no. And if the UN and ICC cannot hold the Venezuelan president accountable for these horrendous acts, how on earth is it going to enforce every country in the UN to make police reforms? The answer to this question is that it simply can't. The problem is compounded, especially if a major world power refuses the reforms, as this communicates to smaller countries that if major countries don't care and aren't punished, then what's stopping them from not caring? Next, the proposition cited a source saying that war, deaths, and genocide have decreased since the creation of the UN. This is an example of the proposition seeing what they want to see. Nowhere in the source does it say the UN had an impact. Actually, the source doesn't even state the name United Nations or UN at all. There are multiple other factors taken into consideration for why war and genocide has decreased. Some of these factors are a world war which wrecked the economy and military manpower in most of the world, the creation of defensive packages with the Warsaw Pact and NATO, which would make the war very difficult, as declaring war on one of these countries in the pacts would essentially have caused World War III. And lastly, but most importantly, the production of nuclear weapons on a large scale in the US and Russia. This is important as it made a full-scale military operation a very risky move, as the use of nuclear weapons will cause what is known as a nuclear holocaust. For these reasons, Judge, you should not let this fact have much weight in the consideration of the usefulness of the UN. Now, the proposition said that the burden of evidence was on me to prove that the UN has failed to maintain the peace. I find this surprising, as the proposition seemed to completely forget my statement that no investigation was done by the UN after the Tiananmen Square incident. But anyway, here's some more evidence. Since the UN's creation, there have been 17 armed conflicts in the world, and in 75 years that the UN has been around. Of these conflicts, 2 were essentially proxy wars between 2 major powers. In one of these wars, the US against Agent Orange. A Riverside war was later deemed as a war crime. What did the UN do? Nothing. Nothing but a slight slap on the wrist for the US. As for genocides, there have been over 20 genocides since the creation of the UN. Now, the proposition tries to refute this fact because it got it from Wikipedia. The Wikipedia page is backed by over 300 references giving it much more credibility. This is why I bring up conviction rates at the ICC, as if only 4 people have been convicted, then what about those responsible for all the other genocides? The UN is supposed to maintain world peace, yet as we can see, genocide and war is still a sad but recurring reality today, and that's why the UN has failed. While the proposition says that my claim that there is no uniform solution is moot because of its definition of substantial, however, again, the metrics that he states, police brutality, executions, and other inhumane behavior, also vary widely and in some countries are nigh inexistent. Also, the countries in which this is most prevalent, while the proposition failed to mention, will most likely not follow the reform as there is no way for the UN to enforce it. One example of the UN's failure to promote and enforce human rights is Iran. Iran is known to use chemical weapons on citizens. This is in fact a violation of the Geneva Protocol, and the UN has once again done barely anything to hinder them from using chemical weapons. Other countries have placed sanctions on Iran, but almost nothing is done mandated from the UN today. Lastly, the proposition says that they believe that neither side holds a burden to present a resolution. I agree, and never said the proposition had to. I just said that it deflates their argument as without an actual solution, it's very hard to prove that a resolution is uniform. For this reason, you should not find the claim completely moot. In conclusion, police brutality is a problem and CGS reform is needed, but the UN is not the one to solve it. It is both not within the UN's jurisdiction, and if the UN managed to pass such an extreme resolution, it would be nigh impossible for the UN to enforce it. For these reasons, Judge, this is why you should side with the opposition. Thank you for listening.